Hi everyone, Ellen here, and welcome to Washed in Watercolor. My favorite watercolors are those that have wet into wet washes. They usually have a beautiful luminosity, and color just flows into color in an almost magical and unpredictable way. For some, mastering wet into wet washes can certainly be a challenge. For one, you have to be aware of the amount of water on your paper, and you also need to be very familiar with your brush and the amount of water your brush holds. Today's demonstration and lesson is this beautiful artichoke. I love all the spiny leaves and I love the color of the purple petals at the top. For the background and each leaf, I will use a wet into wet wash. And if you're just starting off or learning, this will give you plenty of practice as you paint each leaf at a time. I'll start off with a basic drawing of the form. I'm thinking of the body being circular, and then I will find the middle or center to extend that up and add the top on. I'll keep in mind just kind of the form or rotation of each leaf as I'm drawing. And here I'm using a 2B pencil, but I do recommend if you're doing this lesson that you use a 2H, something a little bit lighter. My petals or leaves are not exactly like the photo, but I just want to get the general feel. And you need to make sure that you are wrapping the leaves around, so as the form moves to the sides, it will get a little bit tighter and thinner. I'm satisfied with my drawing, so now it's time to put on some masking fluid. For this lesson, to apply my masking, I'm using a brush, and I just want to treat my brush or pre-treat it in a soapy solution, and that way the masking will easily come off my brush and won't ruin it. I'm applying the masking to the entire outline and then some of the little side ridges of the leaves. For this painting, the colors I'll be using are lemon yellow, quinacridone magenta, perylene maroon, Winsor violet, sap green, perylene green, and burnt sienna. Here are my favorite brushes. From left to right, I have a Princeton Neptune quill, then two Rosemary's Series 402 pointed rounds, and then finally a Princeton Neptune script brush. I prepare my paints and then wet the background with clean water. And working from my lightest color on, I will drop in the paint, working in a wet into wet process. I don't want to go too heavy with my paints. I want the background to be nice and light. As I drop in the paint, I'm just letting it go and flow wherever it wants to. And I'm trying not to get in there and poke too much. Sometimes that's where all things go wrong. So just have fun with it if you're painting along and let the painting move at its own pace and in its own way. Earlier, I applied masking to the top crown. And now I'm going to come in with a little bit more concentrated paint, and everything's still kind of wet and flowing, but I'm going to drop in some darks using some violets, a little bit of the perylene maroon, and some quinacridone magenta. I want to really establish the real dark like area that's really set in that spot. I'm removing the masking fluid from the outer edges only. I'm now going to work the general form of the artichoke, thinking of it as a sphere and that the right upper quadrant is lighter than the left lower quadrant. So you can decide if you're painting along if you want to wet this ahead of time, but I'm just going in with some very kind of wet paint and a brush that holds a fair amount of water. And I'm dropping in some lights on the right hand side, some yellows, and then my sap green, and I'll eventually get very dark with the perylene green on the left lower quadrant. At this point, everything inside the artichoke is still fairly wet, so I'll continue to just drop in these darks, but you do have to babysit or pay attention to the edges because those inner edges, you do want them to flow. So if they feel like they're stuck, they're going to give you a hard edge, or they're drying up, just take a damp brush and kind of work it in the direction towards the inside. I'll just continue to work the outer perimeter in the same way. I'll now paint in the stem. The stem is just a cylindrical shape, and it will be light on the right hand side and darker on the left. It's now time to paint the outer leaves of the artichoke. I've been procrastinating a little bit because I know this is going to be a little redundant, but if you're looking to master wet into wet washes, then painting each leaf over and over again will give you plenty of practice. So I do recommend starting kind of not quite in the center, but on the left-hand side in a somewhat obscure area, especially if you're new to working with wet into wet washes. I want to give each leaf time to dry, and I really don't want one to run into the other. So I'll kind of jump around a little bit. And you can see that the leaves do have that variegated wash, and they pick up a little bit of yellow in the middle, and they're a little lighter, a little bit more burnt sienna at the top. And then at the bottom, I'm adding some perylene green. And I'm just letting it all kind of flow together and maybe helping it out a little bit with my brush. I have switched to using a little bit more of the Perylene red in some areas. I feel that it just has a stronger impact. As I move up the artichoke, the leaves pick up more burnt sienna and maroon. Because watercolor does dry lighter, I'll add some more darks to the top crown. I'll just add a little bit more color to the tips of each leaf. It's hard to see, but there are some faint cast shadows. Adding them really makes a difference. I'll now take off the remaining masking fluid. Taking off the masking can definitely be a little scary. Sometimes I'm left with these really harsh looking lines, but I'll use a flat brush and go over them and just soften all the edges. My wet brush is carrying some of the pigment and it's just nicely filling in some of the white areas. Even though I signed my painting, I still want to go in and work some of the top. That looks much better. I hope you enjoyed watching this and maybe painted along. Please remember to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.